We're pleased to be joined by Cathy Anthofer-Fialon. She is the Executive Director of the American Red Cross Northern Michigan chapter, joining us now on the MegaCast. Cathy, thank you for being with us.
Absolutely.
Appreciate having you on. So right now you're actually on the ground in Louisiana with the American Red Cross working on hurricane relief after the recent hurricane season made a big impact with in the last couple of weeks down in Louisiana. Of course, a place that still very much in their memory has Hurricane Katrina and the disaster that resulted from that severe weather incident in the early 2000s. What's the status right now down in Louisiana? How are things going with the relief effort, and how are the people down in Louisiana that you are encountering, that live there, that work there, that spend their time there? How are they holding up right now after the hurricane?
So when I came down, I arrived on Tuesday, and I was assigned to 4 different parishes. 2 of them were some of the hardest hit parishes, very rural areas, very similar in a lot of ways to northern Michigan. And one of the communities I was in, the city was about the size of Traverse City, and every single power pole in the entire community was down. Every single roof that I saw had damage. Businesses were completely destroyed. So a lot of devastation. But amazing people. I have had the opportunity to work with people that are essentially sleeping where they work to get the job done, and they don't have electricity at their homes. People have joined together. Community partners have come from all over the country with Red Cross to make sure people have food and water and emergency supplies that they might need.
We're joined by Cathy Anthofer-Fialon. She is the Executive Director of the American Red Cross Northern Michigan chapter with us on the MegaCast down in Louisiana currently, working on Hurricane Ida relief with the American Red Cross. And so obviously the storm was anticipated. It was a Category 4 as it was moving north up the Gulf of Mexico. It was expected to be a very, very treacherous storm, potentially even upgrading to a Category 5. How far in advance did you know, or how far in advance at least does the American Red Cross begin to plan for relief efforts, and maybe how far before Hurricane Ida made landfall in Louisiana and in the southern U.S. did you know that you were going to be there on the front lines in the relief effort?
So what's interesting about this storm is, yes, it was in the Gulf, but it strengthened very, very quickly to hurricane strength and to that Category 4 hurricane strength, much more quickly than what has been seen previously. So usually, there needs to be about 72 hours to get everyone out of the community. And the communities here did not have that kind of awareness that it was going to be that strong until it strengthened. It just strengthened so quickly. When I first heard that the storm was a possibility, we put in our availability into a system. So I raised my hand and I said, hey, if you need me, I'm willing to go. Some volunteers were brought down before the storm, and we call that pre-deployed before the storm, so they could hit the ground just the moment that the storm passed. And then others of us, like myself, came right after the storm. So I arrived on Tuesday. And right now I happen to be in New Orleans, sitting in an office in New Orleans, doing some work before I head back out to the communities that I've been assigned. So one of the communities I've been assigned was very hard hit. It's a community near the airport in New Orleans. They still have, much of their community has no electricity. And it's a community that people really didn't have the means to evacuate, to get out of the area. So a lot of apartments and a lot of duplexes. And I've been working with the city there, and they've been amazing in partnering with us and giving us the locations that we can get in and make sure people have food and that people have water and that people have the supplies they need. So I've been on the ground in that community, trying to provide what we can with some of our other amazing volunteers. So we have volunteers from all over the country down here.
We're joined by Cathy Anthofer-Fialon. She is the Executive Director of the American Red Cross Northern Michigan chapter with us on the MegaCast. Cathy, you talked about kind of what went into applying to be part of the relief effort down in the New Orleans area after Hurricane Ida. How do chapters of the Red Cross like yours that do end up volunteering for these relief efforts, what ultimately prompts your volunteerism for this? Is it just simply availability and obviously the goodness of your hearts to want to help people in need after a tragedy such as a natural storm event like Hurricane Ida? Or is it specific to kind of the general areas that are affected by these kinds of storms that does ultimately prompt which chapters of the Red Cross from across the state of Michigan and also across the U.S. would then prompt themselves to say, we're available for the relief effort?
So when we put in our availability, we don't know which disaster we may possibly be sent to. So as you know, we had wildfires happening. While I was down here, of course, Ida went up the East Coast and we had people who had to respond there. So our volunteers just put their name in and raise their hand and say, I'll go where I'm needed. And that's so incredible. We do need volunteers. So if anyone has an interest, all the training is provided for you. It is all free training. Just go to redcross.org/volunteer today, and we'll get you trained, and possibly you could even help us this hurricane season.
And are there focused areas of training, or is it kind of a general training for relief efforts such as this on multiple scales?
It is very focused. So essentially, when you fill out your application to volunteer, you are interviewed to find out what your interest area is. We have people that are doing IT work because that has to be behind the scenes kind of coordination. We have people working in shelters, doing feeding. We have a lot of health professionals, licensed health professionals that are in our shelters, helping people get prescriptions replaced. We have people that drive trucks. And in fact, it may be people that have like driving trucks, but don't do it professionally. I met a medical doctor down here who actually volunteers every year to do disaster assessment. She is a medical doctor, but she said she really feels like she needs to take a break from her practice, and she enjoys getting out in the community and assessing the damage of homes.
We're joined by Cathy Anthofer-Fialon. She's the Executive Director of the American Red Cross Northern Michigan Chapter, joining us today on the MegaCast. And Cathy, for those that do end up volunteering and they do go to these different places across the U.S. for these relief efforts, when you do get on site, what is kind of the process of then going into the legwork that goes into the relief efforts? What is kind of the experience that a volunteer may face, albeit knowing that one disaster relief effort versus the next is always going to be different and have its own variety?
So you really have to be flexible when you come into a disaster situation. So for example, the first 3 nights I slept on a cot in the chapter office because there was no other place for us as volunteers to sleep at that time because there was no electricity at any hotels, any shelters that were stood up. There were no shelters at that time for staff. And so as we're here longer, we're able to, and electricity begins coming on and we're able to coordinate with partners, we get those things. So flexibility is key. Every time you go to a disaster operation, there is staff that is in charge of staff wellness. Every day there's a meeting where we all rally in the morning to find out what the day ahead is like. There's lots of opportunity to be mentored when you're here. There's a lot of camaraderie. I am staying at a location where there's a very large number of Red Cross volunteers here at this location. And we see each other every morning. We see each other when we go to eat, and a lot of camaraderie.
We're joined by Cathy Anthofer-Fialon on the MegaCast. She is the Executive Director of the Michigan chapter of the Northern Michigan chapter of the American Red Cross. And there's not only a need for volunteers, there's also a need for supplies that go into these kinds of relief efforts, not just for Hurricane Ida, which you're currently participating in down in the New Orleans area, but for other disasters like the wildfires that you mentioned, like the hurricane and tropical storm relief on the East Coast and others. What are some of the biggest needs in terms of supply donations that regular people that may be watching the show today or on demand on our website, what are some of those supplies that are most needed right now by the American Red Cross to be able to provide the support that they need to people that are living under these disastrous conditions?
So honestly, it is much better for people to make a financial donation rather than make a donation of actual supplies, because if we have donations of supplies, then that becomes a whole nother logistical piece that we have to manage. So when people make a financial donation, we can make sure we can turn that right around and get it to the area where it's needed most and get it to the supplies and buy those with our partners in the community of where it's needed. So then we don't have the long transportation of those supplies.
We're joined by Cathy Anthofer-Fialon. She is the executive director of the American Red Cross chapter in northern Michigan with us on the MegaCast. And Cathy, in a normal situation outside of the hurricane relief, there are still also volunteer opportunities and other opportunities with the American Red Cross in your local area in northern Michigan. What are some other activities that people can get involved in their hometown and their local areas with the American Red Cross that really, especially right now, in the situation we're in with the pandemic and heading into flu season, that are most common and helpful to their home communities?
So always donating blood. Of course, there's a great need for blood at all times. So donating blood, working at a blood drive. We also serve our armed forces, our Services to Armed Forces program. So working with families who have a member of their family deployed, if there's some sort of emergency, being able to provide that communication to that loved one who's deployed and find out if they need to come home and make that happen. We have many programs. We have our international programs. We have where we have volunteers that are going into schools and teaching international humanitarian law. We have opportunities, of course, to respond to emergencies right in your own community. Home fires happen often, especially as we come into winter months and people are using alternative sources of heating. So we have disaster action teams of volunteers that go to those fires and provide immediate assistance to those families, disaster mental health support, spiritual care, as well as opening a case and managing that case and staying with that family until we're able to hand them off to one of our partners who does long-term recovery or get them back up on their feet and going.
We're joined by Cathy Anthofer-Fialon. She is the executive director of the Northern Michigan chapter of the American Red Cross with us on the MegaCast. And Cathy, just another couple minutes with you before we'll say goodbye today. For those that maybe are just tuning in now, or those that may be interested and missed the information earlier on, where can people go? Where should people go if they are interested in volunteer opportunities with the American Red Cross, whether it be the Northern Michigan chapter or their local chapter?
redcross.org/volunteer today, and we need you. We absolutely need you. If you want to stay in your home chapter, that's fine. If you're interested in deploying, as you've probably seen on the news, there are disasters happening all over our country.
Yeah, we're not out of hurricane season just yet. We're not out of the warm seasons of the year, so hurricanes, wildfires, going to continue to be things that pop up. Hopefully we won't see them, but it's very likely we'll see more of them going forward. Cathy, we appreciate your time. Thanks for being with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you.